Capote, and today we're back with some more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. So today what we're doing is I'm actually planning to go over just the hand traps in the format and how they look against the meta. How if you're playing a certain deck or if you're playing rogue or just even a meta deck, like which hand traps to use and what it's going to do against which decks. I don't know how long this video is going to be, honestly. Usually my videos are pretty long, but anyway, we're just gonna do that, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy. Hopefully it helps someone. If you guys have any suggestions on things you want to see on the channel, like Yu-Gi-Oh related or even Dragon Ball Fighters related, then please just let me know, and I'll do my best to get it out there as soon as possible. Right now, I'm thinking just doing some more deck profiles, doing maybe some EDO Pro, just showing what decks that I've already built can do, and yeah, just stuff like that. But for now, let's do this because I think a lot of people not need this, but want to know just what the meta is going to look like, what just everything. Like against YCS Hartford is happening, I think today, so we'll know like exactly what the meta looks like after that. But until then, actually, I guess you'll probably know by the time this video comes out, but hopefully I'm right in this video and it's not just outdated and whatever. But anyway, let's get into the discussion. So first, the decks that I think are going to be prominent in the format are what's it called? The Therion, the Therion, Adventure Therion ABC, I think is going to be prominent. I think Adventure Plunder Patrol is going to be prominent. I think Despia Adventure Branded or whatever. Maybe even without the Adventure, maybe just Despia Branded is going to be popular. And then for sure Sword Soul, I think. Sword Soul's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's still really good. It's a really good deck, and I I'm scared of it, especially since I play heroes and it's just a really bad matchup against heroes because they don't really lose to Dark Law or Plasma. Plasma they lose a little bit, but they have ways to get rid of Plasma just really easily. Just link off the 10E and bounce it back to hand, so it's not hard to get rid of with their things. But anyway, what can you do to try to stop that? What can you do to try to mitigate that loss against, if you're playing Rogue, if you're playing meta and you don't know what the hell you're doing? Then here is just a discussion. So let's start off with the Ghost Girls. So Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. What does Ash Blossom do? So when a card effect is activated, including one of these effects, quick effect, you can discard this card and negate the effect. So that's if they added a card from deck to hand, special summon from the deck, or send a card from the deck to the graveyard. And you can only use this once per turn. So it's really good. It stops basically any search or any stuff that uses things from the decks. For example, Fusion Destiny. For example, Branded Fusion. So a few examples of this in the meta decks are a lot of the Plunder Patrol cards. You can stop their field spell. You can stop a lot of I'm not exactly sure which monster search because there's just a lot, and I'm not really overly familiar with Plunder Patrol, but it hits the adventure stuff. If they basically have the adventure stuff and nothing else, then you can ash or if you're okay with the Plunder Patrol stuff and you just don't want to deal with adventure, you can ash and you're feeling lucky if they don't open the Griffin Rider, then you can ash the Fateful Adventure, and then they don't get the Griffin Rider search. They can still get the Draco back, but at that point, it's not really, if they're going first, it's not really that big a deal. If they're going second, then I'd much rather, actually no, because then they could summon the Draco back and then just negate it. But anyway, it hits Plunder Patrol, it hits Sword Soul. They have a lot of searching cards, especially with the 10E version of the deck, which is basically like every version of the deck. It hits a lot of the 10E cards that search, hits and summon from deck, which helps them extend into their synchro plays to get into the Sword Soul half of their deck if they haven't drawn it. Or it hits Emergence, which is usually like their recovery play. If like you stop everything else, you can just save Ash for Emergence. Or if you have like a Nibiru or something and they just have Emergence, you can Ash that and it's good. And then against Branded, it hits Aluber, it hits what's it called? It hits Tragedy if they already got, for some reason you let the Branded Fusion go through, or and it hits Branded Fusions, like the best card in their deck. And something that you need to know, you can actually Ash Branded Fusion under Branded Lost. Branded Lost is like Magical Meltdown. You can't negate the activation of the card, but you can negate the effect of the card. And since Ash Blossom does not negate activations, it negates effects. You can still ash the branded fusion under branded lost, which is something that a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but some people don't know, and it does come in handy to know. But anyway, ash is really good. If you can, I would play this at 3 in your deck. If you're like me and play stupid rogue decks that lose to everything, then you're out of luck because you probably don't have enough space because you're engine is huge and you need to play Crossout. But it's still really good. I think you should play Ash in this format just because it's good in every format. It's amazing in every format. It's never going to be a bad card. Ash Blossom is just insane. But yeah, that's Ash Blossom. So now let's go on to the next card. Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre is one of the weird hand traps that sort of comes in and out of play depending on what's good in the meta. Right now, I think it's really good because Therion ABC is a thing, Plunder Patrol is a thing, what's it called? This is actually really good against Plunder Patrol, specifically because of Blackbeard and the field spell, and it's good against it's pretty decent against Sword Soul. They keep the tuner token on the field if you go. Anyway, I'll explain what Ghost Ogre does in a bit. But it's good against Sword Soul. Not as good as the other decks, but it's good against Adventure for sure. It completely stops Adventure if they're playing any of that in their strategy. And against Branded, it doesn't do that much. It doesn't do that much against Branded, which is why some people aren't playing this. But because there's so much other sort of decks in the format. Oh my goodness, what was that? I hope you didn't hear that, but if you did, I'm sorry. Anyway, so why is this good? So it is good because when a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell or trap card that was already face up on the field activates their effect, you can send this card from your hand to the field to the graveyard and destroy that card in the field, and you can only activate this effect of Ghost Ogre once per turn. So why is this good? It is because it hits field spells, it hits continuous spell and traps, and it hits monsters on the field. Now, why is this good against every deck in the meta? Well, all of these are like good against rogue decks as well. I'm just focusing on the meta because that's probably what people want to know. If you're going to like a pretty competitive locals, or if you're going against, or if you're planning to go on YCSs and you're like, hey, what's good against everything? Then that's what this video is for. But anyway, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Why is it good against Branded? It's not. It's not good against Branded. You probably side this out against Branded, just because for a lot of the Branded cards, you can use cards in the graveyard and on in your hand to fuse, unless it's like something else. Unless it's like branded in red or something. Most of the fusions. Like the monster fusions, they fuse from graveyard and field and banished or whatever, or from graveyard and field, which this sends to grave, so most of the time it isn't going to work. So yeah, it's not really good against Branded. It's okay against Sword Soul, because when the Sword Soul monster hits the field and activates its effect to summon a token, you can Ghost Ogre, and then they have no way to go into their synchro material if they have nothing else. They usually have something else, but it slows them down a little. It doesn't give that little extra extension. So it's okay against Sword Soul. So yeah, it's like decent against Sword Soul. Plunder Patrol, it's actually really good against. They have a field spell. They have I think Continuous Trap. I don't know what the Continuous Trap does. I don't remember, but it's really good in specifically the case of Blackbeard. Blackbeard is basically how they get all their extra deck monsters onto the field, and how they do it on your turn depending on what's in the graveyard and on the field. Now, why is this good against Blackbeard? It's because Blackbeard's effect is to target a Plunder Patrol monster on the field and turn it into an extra deck monster. Now, why is this good against that? Because when they activate Blackbeard, if you Ghost Ogre, it gets destroyed, and usually they're targeting the Blackbeard itself to equip to a monster and turn it into, to equip to an extra deck monster and turn it into whatever. Now, if you Ghost Ogre the Blackbeard is no longer in the field, the target is no longer valid, and they can't summon the extra deck monster, and they lose their Blackbeard, which is really good. Also, they have Plunder, the whatever pirate house thing, I don't know, this field spell. You can Ghost Ogre their field spell, get them out of a search, and they don't get their attack boost, which usually, like, it's a lot of attack. They get their monsters to like 5,000 attack with that thing. It's crazy. So Ghost Ogre is really good against that. And also the adventure stuff. Like I said, if you hit Fateful Adventure, it is continuous spell trap. So when they activate their effect, you Ghost Ogre, and they can't resolve the effect because continuous spells and traps and field spells have to be on field to resolve their effects. Did I miss any other decks? Therion ABC. So Therion ABC has Union Hanger, which is their field spell. You can Ghost Ogre that, and it's really good. You can Ghost Ogre the Therion field spell, so then I don't get their Therion search. You can Ghost Ogre, like, basically any other card. It's not really good against the ABC part of the deck because they get effects when they go to the graveyard, but the Therion deck, the Therion half of the deck, to like if they activate their effect to equip a monster from the graveyard, then I'm not sure if that's an on field effect or in hand effect. I'm still new to the Therion stuff. I know a little bit about it, but I know enough about it to be able to know what hand traps are good against them. But like, anyway, Ghost Ogre, it's good against Therion. If they negate your things, they lose their Therion, and that's pretty good. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion. Now, Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion is interesting. So when a card is activated that includes any of these effects, quick effect, you can discard this card and negate the activation. Card in the graveyard, add a card from the graveyard to the deck or extra deck, special summon a monster from the graveyard or banish a card from the graveyard, and then you can only use this once per turn. Also, I forgot to say, Ghost Ogre has to go to the graveyard to resolve his effect, whereas Ash and Ghost Spell don't, so that's something that you have to think about. If they have anything that banishes or whatever, then yeah, be cautious that you can't activate Ghost Ogre. Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, what is it good against? So a lot of the it's okay against Plunder Patrol. Not the best against Plunder Patrol, specifically because they have so much extension in that deck. Like, if you stop their one summon from the graveyard, it's not going to do the greatest. Also, I think DPE is still in the format just because people are realizing, hey, 2 Fusion Destiny is still really good. They're just playing it in their main decks and just saying, like, hey, if I draw Fusion Destiny, that's amazing. If I draw the bricks, I draw the bricks. But it stops DPE, which is good. It stops... Now, against Sword Soul, they do a lot of banishing from the graveyard as effect and not as cost. So, Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion does stop that. The Tenyi effects, they banish to do stuff, so you can Ghost Spell that. What else? Yeah, their Synchro monsters do banishing. It's just really good. Also, the Baron de Fleur, usually if they use their negate, you can they bring it back to the extra and bring back any of their stuff for extension or for starting or whatever, and you can go spell that, and then the Baron just stays there. It's not a quick effect pop, it's just a normal pop, so it's basically useless. Let's see what other deck. Therion ABC. So Therion ABC is pretty decent. This card is maybe okay against them. It's not the best, because a lot of their stuff doesn't summon from graveyard, it equips from graveyard, so this doesn't really work against that. But so this isn't really that good against Therion ABC, but it's decent against the other ones. It's against Branded, it's pretty good because you can ban it. You can stop their Albion if they do decide to go into Albion. You can stop their Branded Red, which is usually their way of interacting with you in their on your turn. And that's pretty big. Now let's go into Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler is actually, before we do that, I actually don't have a copy of DD Crow because I traded mine all away. But let's talk about DD Crow. So what DD Crow is you can discard this card to the graveyard to banish one card in your opponent's graveyard, or in either graveyard, whatever, it doesn't matter. Usually it's going to be your opponent's graveyard, but let's talk about this with Ghost Spell because they're sort of similar but sort of different in the same way. So DD Crow is pretty good in this format. Against Branded, it's not the it stops the Branded Red, because if you stop the add to the hand, then it stops the Branded Red completely because it has to add to hand for them to be able to fuse. What else? Against Plunder Patrol, it's decent because you can. They need For them to summon from the extra deck, they need a card of the same attribute in either graveyard or on either field. And if you banish the card that they like, if you banish the one light in the graveyards or in their graveyard, then you or the one fire in their graveyard, then they can't really do much with their extra deck. Like again, you have to know the Plunder Patrol cards and what the extra deck monsters need to be able to be summoned, but that's something you can learn on your own. And yeah, if you DD Crow the right thing, then you DD Crow the right thing. It's really good. Then against Therion ABC, it's actually pretty good because you can actually stop the Therion and the ABC effects from bringing back to graveyard. Because unlike Bell, DD Crow is just banishing from graveyard, right? So and they have to target to equip. So if Therion targets to equip, or if ABC's target to equip, then all you have to do is banish the card and it works. It doesn't stop their turn, but it really messes them up, just because they can't go into ABC a lot of the time, or unless they have like good extension, or the Therion negate isn't active, and at that point they're just playing ABCs, which is still good, but there's a reason why it isn't. It wasn't meta before Therion. And again, it might not be meta, I might be wrong, but this is just what I think is going to happen in the format. Next, let's go into Effect Veiler. So Effect Veiler, what does this do? During your opponent's main phase, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, select one effect monster your opponent controls, negate that opponent's monster effect. Now, Effect Veiler, it's honestly, I think it's pretty weak, this format. It's okay. So it's situationally good because against branded, if they have the branded fusion, or if they have whatever, you can Effect Veiler one of their fusion monsters, and that stops them. But they usually have follow up and usually ways to get into their other plays. And a lot of people are playing the Adventure branded, so they'll have a negate. Again, you can negate the Griffin Rider and then Nibiru or something, and that'd be good. But again, they don't usually summon that much during a turn, so that won't really be a factor. You can Effect Veiler, and I'll actually talk about Imperm and Effect Veiler in the same thing. Because they're basically the same card, except Imperm's just a little bit better. Now, what does Imperm do? Target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn. If this card was set before its activation on the field at resolution, for the rest of his turn, all spell traps in the column are negated. If you control no cards, you can activate this card in your hand. So it's basically Effect Veiler, but a little bit better because you can activate it during your turn and outside of the main phase. And if you set it, it has an extra bonus. So one effect negation doesn't really get you that far, because all of the decks are so explosive. Like again, like in branded, if you stop their one Libellion effect, if they have any other extension, it doesn't matter. If they have a Brandon Red, they can use that and just go off anyway, or and then just set the Brandon Red again with the Mirror Jade at the end of the turn, like they always do. Against Adventure, you can Imperm the Griffin Rider and get that Omni Gate out of the way, and then do some other hand trap stuff, which is good. But again, that's just stopping the one engine that they have to supplement everything else. These two are good with other hand traps in your hand, but alone they don't do that much. Now let's go into Sword Soul. Sword Soul, these guys are pretty good. But again, if your Sword Soul opponent has any extension and you don't have another hand trap, then you're kind of screwed, only have the one monster that they can summon that isn't that's a Sword Soul, then they only have the one monster that's a Sword Soul they can summon. If they start with the 10U stuff, a lot of their stuff doesn't have effects on the field. They have effects on the grave, and you can and they go into the Synchro monsters, which you can negate and then stop them from going to the Sword Soul. But if they have any Sword Soul in hand, they can just do it anyway. It's really, the 10U stuff is really just it's really easy to get into the Sword Soul stuff, and if you already have it, it's too late. But again, these are good with other stuff, but not that good alone. And against Plunder Patrol, yeah, these do basically nothing. A lot of their effects, like, you can imperm the big boats and like stop a certain effect from going off, but Plunder Patrol can extend to the wazoo, man. It's insane how much they can extend. And it's these do very little against that. And then what else? Sword Soul, Plunder Patrol, Therion, ABC. Yeah, they can just extend a lot. You can trade for the Therion, but like for all the other stuff, they trigger and they go to the grave and stuff, and they add and they add and they add, and it's just it keeps going and keeps going. So unless they brick hard, yeah. And again, a lot of the time they're going to have the adventure stuff, so this is usually going to trade for that. Next, let's go into Nibiru. Now, this, just like the other ones, is good with another hand trap. So, what does this do? During the main phase, if your opponent normally special summons 5 or more monsters, during the turn quick effect, you contribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand, and special summon 1 primal being token with your to your opponent's field. Total attack becomes the combined attack of all the attributed monsters, and defense and whatever. So this is really good, again, with a supplement, because a lot of the decks in this format are going to have a negate, or, like Branded, don't summon more than 5 times. So let's go over how good it is against every deck. So Branded, this card kind of sucks against it. It really sucks against it. They're not going to summon more than 5 times. They summon like 3 max, usually only 2. So it's not that good against that deck. But and I wouldn't recommend main decking Nibiru. Maybe a few depending on what you have at your locals. But if you're planning to go into main, like, I don't know about main decking Nibiru, honestly, because it's good with other stuff. If you have an effect negation and then a Nibiru, then that's great, because then you can usually get it to go off, or if you have a called by or something. Now let's go on to the other decks. So, Plunder Patrol. Usually Plunder Patrol, okay, I won't say usually. Usually they're playing the Adventure Package, which gets a negate out before 5 summons. And a lot of the time, at least the players that I know, have been playing totally awesome in the deck, because there are 2 level 4 water monsters. They can go into Bahamut, and then they can go into totally awesome, and then do all their combos. Now, why does this matter? Because that means that they can get 1 or 2 negates very easily before 5 summons. And if you... and that's before going into their full combo and going into their Blackbeard and going to their every janky whatever. So Nibiru is, again, good with another card, with a negation, with an Ash that stops the negation from going through, you know? But it's not very good on its own. Sword Soul, they can get Maroon so easily. They can get a negate really easily. Usually Nibiruing before they get a negate is very hard. And again, maybe with negation and something else, it's good, but not very good against its own. This kid, and then against Therion ABC, again, they get their Therion. But a lot of the time they do summon 5 times before getting to the Therion. Unless they open it, then it's just whatever. But if they're not careful, then Nibiru can work against them. But again, that very much depends on the player you're facing and not so much of the deck. Against the deck itself, it's not that good. Again, on its own, with another negation, with like an Imperm or an Effect Veiler, it's great. But on its own, it's very weak. Again, that's just what I think. It's my opinion. But if you disagree, then please let me know in the comments. But anyway, and then against Rogue, this card is insane. Usually they can't do anything. I play Heroes and Lifetimes, and I hard lose to this card. So it's like, yeah. But anyway, let's go into Droll and Lockbird. So Droll and Lockbird is actually good against some of the decks in the format, but not that good against others. Now, against Branded, it's not that good because all they really do is use cards from deck, but they don't add from deck really that often. And they even set to the field. So Droll and Lockbird is not that good against them. They just don't add that much. Then Therion ABC, they do add a lot, but if you if you do Droll and Lockbird, it will hurt them a lot actually. But that just depends if they don't have the called by and if they don't have a negate on board beforehand. If the first thing they do is like summon something and then do Therion stuff, and then they do their searching after, then it's like, yeah, you can switch for a negate, but again, I think this is good, but if they get the negate out, they get the negate out. I think this is good against ABC Therion, though. Then Plunder Patrol. Again, if you use this, one cool thing is that if they are starting off with the adventure stuff, is you can let the ad go from the adventure, and they summon their Griffin Rider, but then, or they add their Griffin Rider, and then you Droll and Lockbird, and they can't do any of their Plunder Patrol stuff, because a lot of their Plunder Patrol stuff adds. So, yeah, Drone Lockbird is good against Plunder, and then Sword Soul Tenyi does not do a lot of adding. They do a lot of summoning from deck, but they do some, like very little adding, one or two. So you're only really ever stopping one or two searches. So it's okay against them, but not that good. Honestly, I don't know about Mini Drill. It's all up to preference. And again, kills road decks really good. It kills me. Not really live twin, but it does kill heroes really badly. Actually, if you open Ferris, it's not the worst. But now Pancreatops. Now this is sort of like a hand trap. I think Pancreatops, if you're aiming for a going second deck, is really good. It's still really good, just because it's like a big monster you can summon. Like it attacks over the adventure stuff. Not the for some reason not the Griffin, because they made him like 28 for some reason. But it attacks over the token, which then they can't activate the Griffin stuff. And then you can pop something else using his effect, or at the very least it trades for a negate, and it's basically free. So it does basically the same thing against every deck. Usually you're not stopping anything. Usually you're just clearing stuff. But again, it's okay. This is like a pseudo hand trap card. I just wanted to include it because it is sort of a hand trap, but not really. Now Lancia. Lancia is interesting in this format. It's good against Sword Soul because Sword Soul does a lot of banishing, especially with the Tenyi part of their deck. So if they can't banish, that sucks. So it's good against Sword Soul. It's not good against Branded. They can use anything from a graveyard or banish. The only card that it really stops is Branded in red, and that's during your turn. Or if they do it during their turn, then yeah, Lancia. But Lancia, you can only activate. Oh, I forgot to go over what the cards do. Droll and Lockbird, what it does is when a card is added to the main deck to your opponent's hand, you can activate this effect, and neither player can add from their deck to their hand anymore. And Pancreatops, you can special summon him if your opponent controls more monsters, and then quick effect, you can tribute this card to destroy a card in the field, targeting. Lancia, what he does is you can set this card from your hand to the field and spell trap card zone. During your opponent's turn, if this set card in the spell and trap card zone is destroyed by sent to the graveyard, or you can discard this card. And during your opponent's turn, you contribute this card from your hand face up on the field. Neither player or face down on the field. No, face up on the field. Neither player can banish cards for the rest of the turn. So that again, the Sword Soul banishes a lot, so it does hurt them quite a bit. It doesn't hurt Branded at all because all their only cards that banish are Albion and what's it called? Brandon Red, and Brandon Red they don't usually use them during their turn, so it's not very good against them. Plunder Patrol does no banishing at all. It does no banishing at all. It's not good. It's not good against Plunder Patrol. Therion ABC, the only things that they banish for is to summon the ABC monster. Besides that, and that's only one less negate and one less banish on the opponent's turn. It's not that big a deal. They still have a lot of other stuff on the field. Yeah. Those are all the hand traps that I wanted to talk about for today, but now I'm going into sort of pseudo hand traps, if that makes sense. Cards that you still use from your hand and work as sort of hand traps, but aren't really hand traps, if that makes sense. Like, you can only use them in your turn or during special circumstances, or you have to set them first. So I have 4 of these. One of them is Called By, one of them is Droplet, one of them is Crossout, and one of them is Scythe. Now, Called By the Grave, what does this do? Target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of this turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on field of monsters with the same name. Now, this is a quick play card. Now, this means that you can't activate during your opponent's turn if they're going first, but you can activate it during your opponent's turn if you go first and you set it, or during your turn. Now, why I think this card is really good in this format, specifically because it stops all the most of the hand traps being played, because all of them have to be discarded to the graveyard or go to the graveyard to activate. And it also stops some of your opponent's plays. So, for example, if you're going first against, or if, let's say it's late. Let's say you're going first, because that's just the easiest. If you set this card, and let's say Sword Soul, their Tenyi goes to the graveyard, and they need it for extension to go into their Sword Soul plays. You Called By the Graveyard, they can't banish it and extend with it anymore. branded. You called by the grave their target for branded in red. They can't do anything on your turn except Mirror Jade, which most of the time they use during their turn to make sure the branded in red is set to the field. Unless they already have the branded in red, then they don't do that and they just keep their stuff, which is like good. But again, one non-targeting banish isn't the worst most of the time, especially if you're playing meta. Then let's say Plunder Patrol. Plunder Patrol, this card is very good against because, like I said, they have to have a certain attribute in the graveyard to be able to do stuff. So if they only have one card with that attribute, you can preemptively get rid of it, and they can't summon a specific monster from their extra deck. Say they have a Light in the graveyard. That's the best card in their deck because it's an Omni Negate that then searches you after it negates. That it then searches for you after it negates. So if you get rid of the only Light in their graveyard is in their graveyard, then you can call by and they can't use the best card in their deck. Or if you, for example, I think the dark one is the Xyz monster that banishes non-targeting and protects itself from being destroyed. Again, if they have a dark monster and you're playing for some reason like an all whatever deck, like maybe you're playing agents or something, then you call by the grave their dark monster, and it's like, well, okay, well, they can't banish your stuff anymore. It's really good against Plunder Patrol, and it stops their effects from going off in the grave, which a lot of them have effects when they're discarded. And if your opponent doesn't open up their hand, it can be really impactful if you hit the right card. Now, Branded already said what it's good against. Sword Soul, again, you can banish the Tenyis, you can banish the Sword Soul card in their graveyard because a lot of the time they need a Sword Soul card in the graveyard to do a lot of extension. So you can call by that. And then for Theron ABC, you can banish any of the targets they're bringing back to the field, or any of the starters they have that go to the graveyard and add cards to the hand. It depends on the player and the hand which one is going to be the best to do that for. But stopping the Therion is never a bad thing, you know. So Called By is really good, and also it insulates you against stuff like Ash. So cards that it insulates you against. It insulates you against Lancia, it insulates you against Pancreatops, against Droll, against Effect Veiler, against Ghost Spell, against Ghost Ogre, and against Ash Blossom. So if you're going first and you're worried about Handtraps, this is really good for that. And it's and also DD Crow. I don't have that here, but it does help against DD Crow. And or if it's during your opponent's turn and they do any, if like you need an important like thing to go off and they do something that tributes, maybe even against Toad in the Plunder Patrol decks, then you can stop it. And it's really good. Now, Scythe. Scythe, there aren't many decks that can play it anymore. You definitely don't want to play it with... Actually, Dagda is still a thing, but there aren't decks that can inherently play it because there aren't decks that can just turbo out DPE anymore. There are a few decks that can. Live Twins, for example, I still play this in Live Twins because I hate myself and I'm a horrible person. But Scythe, I don't recommend maining it if you don't have a way to just. So let's go over what it does. If it's just basically if it's destroyed if it's destroyed, you can summon it from the graveyard, and when it's not special summoned from the special summon. If it's a special summon during your opponent's turn, you can your opponent can't summon from the extra deck for that turn. So it's like, it used to be a big prevalent thing when Anaconda was still a thing, because you could just turbo out DP after Dagda and then like have this set and it's just a thing. Right now, I don't think this is going to be really prevalent in the format, specifically because a lot of decks can't, like they're playing 2 Fusion Destinies, but that's not guaranteed, and you don't play Dagda for something that isn't guaranteed, because space in the extra deck is especially tricky right now, I think. Maybe not tricky, but it's tight for a lot of decks. So Artifact Scythe, if you can play it, I do recommend playing it, but if you can't, then I don't recommend siding it for like the Crossout or anything, because you're not going to see it a lot. And if you do, then that's just very unlucky. Now, Crossout Designator. What's it called? I do for the meta decks, I do recommend siding this specifically for the mirror match, because if you're playing a meta deck and you're going to like a big event, you're going to know your deck very well. You're going to know the choke points, like the main deck choke points and whatever. And if you have Crossout in the field, you can stop your opponent from activate cards effects like in your deck, any card in your deck. So let me go over what it does for you to understand that. So declare one card name, banish that card of the declared card from your main deck, and if you do, negate its effects as well as its activated effects on the field and cards with the same original name as the card until the end of the turn. Now, what this means is that I definitely recommend, if you're playing a rogue deck that loses to stuff like Nibiru or One Interruption, I definitely recommend playing this. I main deck this in Heroes and I main deck this in Live Twins, specifically because they both lose to everything. So I do recommend playing this if you're playing a rogue deck. If you're playing a main deck, I recommend siding this, specifically if you're playing Despia or any Therion stuff or any adventure stuff. Because if you do, if you know you're playing an opponent with the same deck or the same engine, say the adventure stuff, you can like set Crossout Designator during your turn, and then during their turn, you activate it, called Rite of Aramasir, after they activate it, and it's negated, right? So they can't go into their adventure stuff. Or if you're playing the exact same deck, then you can call one of the choke points after they activate it, and it's negated for the turn, and they can't do anything. So it's a really good card in the mirror, and it's a really good card if you're playing Rogue specifically, because you can play like a little bit of Handtraps, and then sort of make sure, like, insulate yourself from them, more than just the one copy of Called by the Grave in your deck, if that makes sense. Then Forbidden Droplets. Now, why am I including this in this? Because this you can set going first, and going second, it just stops so much crap. It stops so much crap. It's such a good card. So what does it do? Send any number of other cards from your hand or field to the graveyard. Choose that many effect monsters your opponent controls until the end of the turn. Their effectives have. Also, their effects are negated. In response to this card's activation, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects of cards with the same original type, monster, spell, or trap as the cards sent to the graveyard to activate this card. Why is that important? Because a lot of the decks right now end with Omni Negates and Interruption on your turn. And with this, you can choose what to negate, and there's really no downside except for discarding cards from your hand, which a lot of decks like to do. You like to see certain cards in the graveyard. A lot of the time you can extend with it. A lot of the time you can do whatever. Now, I do recommend maining this card. I know it's like, oh my gosh, it's a going second card. You can't really do anything going first. That's untrue, because a lot of the time you're going to have extra cards in your hand or extra cards on the field that you don't really need, or you're going to use a card on the field that, and then like it's going to be useless. Or it might just save you, because if there is a specific monster card that your opponent controls, like if they're on their turn and you want to stop it because you're going to be like, hey, they're going to destroy my cards, then you activate this and they don't. Or if they're attacking with a really large attack monster, you can activate this to have their attack and make sure you beat over it, you know? But why? That's not the reason I think it's that good. The reason I think it's good is because a lot of the times, every deck in this format wants to go first. There's no deck in the format that wants to go second, and in fact, it is very bad to go second, especially now with the adventure stuff in the format. Because there's going to be a lot of interaction on your turn, whether it be spawn trap interaction or monster interaction. And a lot of time, you can't really fight through all of it. But Forbidden Droplet, what it does is it makes sure your opponent can't respond to the negation of your card, of their card, and it makes sure that you can get through those really problematic cards that don't let you play, without really much investment, if that makes sense. So like in Heroes, for example, I main deck I main deck 2 of this. In Live Twins, I main deck 3. I main deck 3 in Live Twins because they can use it a bit better than Heroes. But why do I do this? It's because if I go second, I want to see this card, because this card lets me play when I usually wouldn't be able to play, if that makes sense. That's why I main deck it, because there's always a chance you're going to go second. And yeah, here your deck, meta decks and Heroes and Live Twins can go second for sure. But a lot of the time, that like one Omni Negate or that one extra banish is going to do a lot. So if you can get rid of that and maybe even plus off of it, that's just great, right? So I think Droplet is just really good in this format. Now, what does it do against what big threats are you going to face from every deck? So for Branded, it's going to be the Mirror Jade. It's going to be the Guardian Chimera. And you can chain this to Guardian Chimera. You can chain this to Mirror Jade to stop their effects. And like they can't respond with monster effects, right? They can't respond with any of their stuff to just banish themselves to avoid targeting or whatever. And this doesn't even target. It's just in select cards. So it's just really good against Branded, specifically because you can activate this on your turn if you're going second, or on their turn if you're going first. So if they're activating their Mirror Jade on their turn, they can only activate it once, right? So if the activation happens, the activation happens. But or you can even do it before they do it so they don't get the search off of the Albion. So it's really good against that because it stops all their interaction, and it stops their extension to the next turn and their interaction during your turn most of the time, because they only play 2 Brandon Red usually. So Sword Soul, what does this do against them? Their end board is usually Barone and a bunch of other funky stuff. So if you stop the card that can banish stuff, you stop the other big monster, and if you stop the Barone, you stop the Omni Negate. So with 2 cards sent from the from your hand to the graveyard, or the field to the graveyard, then you can pretty much stop their stuff. And if one of them is monster, they can't negate it, right? So yeah, it's really good. And I'm gonna explain something that you can do with Droplets really like in a bit, but. Then against Plunder Patrol, yeah, a lot of their stuff negates. So it doesn't really do. It stops the Wandering Griffin Rider. It stops the more, I don't know what it's called, the fusion one that searches them when they Omni negate. Stops their banish. It stops all of their monsters, and it's pretty good. And then with the Therion, it stops the Therion, it stops the ABC Dragon Buster, it stops whatever else other crap they have on their field. And again, you can pick and choose which ones you think you can play through and which ones you think you can't, and then negate those. You don't have to negate everything on field like Dark Ruler, right? You can just choose what to negate, which is what makes this card so good. But another thing that makes this card so good is something that a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people I don't see utilize a lot. So a lot of the times you're going to see, let's say, whatever, but this is our hand or whatever. A lot of the times you're going to see people just activate it and get rid of their spells and traps just because, and especially if they're quick plays. But one thing that you can do is, because Forbidden Droplets is a quick play, say you have a normal spell card. Let's say, you know what, I'm just going to use Ghost Spell because whatever, she's pretty. So let's say you're playing heroes like I am, because I'm always playing heroes. So, let's say you activate E-Emergency Call, or a hero lives, and say your opponent responds to it with an Omni Negate, because that's what they do. So after they respond to it with their Omni Negate, you can actually respond with Forbidden Droplets and send the card that you activated. Or say you're activating you're normal summoning a Stratos, or normal summoning any monster that has a normal summon effect, right? You can actually activate Droplets, chain it, use that monster, or use that spell and trap as material, and then negate a card on the field using that as like material for the send. So they can't respond with spells, or they can't respond with monsters, and you can use cards from the hand if you want to negate too. So if you want to use a spell and then a monster from hand, that's great, but you still get the activation of the spell card, which a lot of the times can mean the difference between a game loss and a game win. So yeah, that's just something. So that's all I have for discussion for today. I hope this helped someone. I hope this is helpful. If you guys have any suggestions on what you want to see from the channel, what you want to see me talk about, then please let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Hope you have a great day.